אני שמח להזמין את הדובר הרביעי לפני שאנחנו פותחים בדיון.
Lecturer, before we start a debate that will be pretty heated, I expect. It is Eitay Mack, a lawyer and attorney who represents Emek Shaveh in various debates, and he's going to speak about holier and less holy sacred sites. How does Israel manage the sacred sites? Hello, everyone. What I will present now is the result of my work and that of Emek Shaveh to understand the situation on the ground where sacred sites for others are becoming sacred sites for Jews only, and sites which have no connection to any sanctity turn into sacred sites for Jews once again. So all these sacred sites, which are both archaeological sites, as we know, are sacred to more than one religion normally. And perhaps because the sacred sites were very much absorbed into the Palestinian, Arab, and Israeli Jewish conflict, there is no clear-cut definition in the law what is a sacred site or holy site, and they were defined a priori just by being part of ad hoc lists of the Ottoman rule or the British Mandate. And they also established the status quo principle, according to which we do not change the possession and the liberty of worship in the sacred sites. And the British Mandate added that the court will not intervene in holy sites and in the freedom of religion there. Israel understood from the start that the holy sites is a true headache, and so already in the Israeli Declaration of Independence, it was said that Israel would preserve the holy sites of all religions. You know, the Sepulchre Church and the Tomb of the Patriarchs and the Rachel Tomb, etc., became part of that. The Ministry of Religious Affairs, as soon as it was set up, established Muslim and Druze sites, and they charted the holy sites of the Muslims and Druze within Israel. And in fact, this department, in different ways, started a process which brought to a Judaization of Muslim sites and increased interest of Jewish audiences in those sites. There's the example of the Director General of the Ministry of Religious Affairs. He was also chairman of an association whose role was to promote the link of the Jews to holy sites. In the city of David, there had been a Muslim mosque, and after the conquest of the Western Bank, in the West Bank in the '67 war, there was huge criticism on Israel, and the story of the holy sites again created a lot of pressures. And in order to calm that pressure, Israel enacted the law on the conservation of holy sites, but that law as well did not determine and did not define exactly what is a holy site or sacred site. And in 1981, in parallel to legislating the law of Jerusalem being the capital of Israel, there were also regulations set on the preservation of holy sites to the Jews. And there is a list here starting from desecrating the Sabbath and holidays, inappropriate dress, speaking out loud, etc. And so they also set a list of 16 places holy to the Jews, among them the the Western Wall and its plaza, including all the structures adjacent to it and every passageway into it. And see, there's the Elijah cave, bringing in the Elijah Cave into the regulation is in fact a closure of a Judaization process which started in 48, and to put an end to the freedom of religion of the Muslims. And the Elijah Cave appears under Jewish sites, and it is described as a holy site for the Jews. And it says that on one wall there are writings, because in other times, other periods, it was also sacred to Muslims and the Christians, and it is written in the past tense now. Who decided that the sacredness or holiness of this site for the Christians and the Muslims has stopped, has come to an end? In defining those regulations, every underground or above ground passageway to a holy site, to the wall, something happened here that really somehow evaded a public site and the legal world, because in fact those regulations were enacted in parallel to the opening of the wall tunnels. And we see that these tunnels are being expanded, and based on these regulations, they have become a site holy and sacred to the Jews alone. And so entire quarters, Muslim quarters and Christian quarters, were hallowed, sort of, and sanctified for the Jews. And some of them even in the Via Dolorosa. So the various bans which apply to these places have become even stricter after the struggle of the women of the wall to pray. And there is a reservation added to a ban on acting not according to the custom in this place. In 1994, there was a verdict in regard to the women of the Kotel, and the Supreme Court said that this had been properly regulated, even though the Minister of Religious Affairs had consulted only with the chief rabbis. And Supreme Court said that they're the supreme halachic authority, and he does not have to consult with somebody else. But as I presented, since these regulations hallowed and sanctified sites that belong to other religions, entire areas in the old city, even sites that are outside of Jerusalem, we believe that they should have consulted with the representatives of the other religions as well. In 2004, the Adala Association tried to challenge those regulations and a petition to the Supreme Court demanding that the Minister of Religious Affairs creates regulations also for sacred sites to the Muslims and to the Christians. But the Supreme Court said that there is no need for a formal recognition for that, for the authorities in the country to relate to them as such in effect. But of course, that did not happen on the ground, and we do know that many places that are sacred to the Muslims are neglected, are derelict, and not attended to properly. And we witnessed also the phenomenon of taking over by various elements and the Judaization of sacred sites to the Muslims. And so we believe that there should have been a formal recognition to places, to sites that are sacred to other religions as well. In 1989, after enacting those regulations, the government of Israel decided to set up a new body that we were not familiar with it until a few months ago, a government company which is supposed to run all the religious sites and is supposed to attend to their development. And it turns out that it is covering about 160 sites that are defined as being sacred to the Jewish faith for many generations. But if we had 16, how did we get to 160? And we understand that this happened due to a very wide definition by the law, and this is how they define it: a site where there is a tradition that connects it to a personality or to a historic event in the history of the Jewish people, and it represents a place of pilgrimage and of convening and prayer in special events, on holiday eves, in the first day of the month, and throughout the year. It took a full year until we got a list of holy sites, and we got a list from the National Center of Development of Holy Sites of 17 sites that are hallowed and sacred only to the Jews and are budgeted as such. Out of them, it's a very interesting list. Some of them are also sacred to other religions. For instance, David's tomb, the tomb of Huldah, the prophetess, the tomb of Rachel, and some of the sites we do not understand where their sacredness stems from. We do not know that there was some rite there, such as the Siloam cave or the Zedekiah cave. And the tomb of Rachel is under military rule, so how come it is not? It is under a civilian association. A cave which is next to the bus station at Sultan Suleiman, and it has been defined as a Jewish holy site, whereas it is part of the Holy Sepulchre Church. And the David tomb takes about 50% of the Muslim quarter, so it is also, that too is holy or sacred to the Jews, in addition to the recognition of the Ministry of Religious Affairs and that company. We consider the significance underground. In David's tomb, for instance, on Mount Zion, and in Rachel's tomb, because there used to be a mosque there for hundreds of years, and there was an Islamic rite. Today it is entirely prevented, and only Jewish religious practicing is permitted. Unfortunately, comments not made into a microphone are not heard by the interpreters. In August 2015, we addressed the Parks Authority, and we demanded to stop the work in the Bab el Rahma cemetery next to the Lions Gate. There is an article in the Antiquities law. When you want to excavate in a site that has a religious purpose, an interministerial committee should convene with the Ministry of Culture, the Minister of Justice, the Minister of Religious Affairs. And we demanded that this committee be convened regarding the work that the Parks Authority has carried out there. And we received the answer that there is no need for that committee to convene because this is not an antiquity site and it is just a cemetery. And so we ask, how is it possible that an old and still active cemetery next to the Lions Gate is not considered as a sacred site for religious purposes? And according to the list of the Israeli Company for the Development of Religious Sites, the king's tombs, where there is no Jewish rite for hundreds of years, is considered a sacred rite. And if any work was to be undertaken there, that ministerial committee would have been convened. I'd like to show you one of the activities in the Zedekiah cave in the last month. This girl who is sacred to the Jews according to the Ministry of Religious Affairs. In February, Karen Peles has performed her best songs, just she alone on a piano. And I'd like to conclude. One might conclude and say that the approach of the State of Israel to the holy sites is a real mess, which is designed to permit a certain obscurity about this. And only 16 sites which are officially recognized, and there are another 160 that are semi-formally recognized by this governmental company, out of which some 17 in the area of Jerusalem. And so we can see that through the budgeting of the state and the management by the state, a process of Judaization and slow taking over by the government in these places is taking place. And it is preventing the ministerial committee from being convened. And they're trying to create an image whereby those who are making the decisions are not the political echelon, but rather the lower administrative echelons. In our view, if the State of Israel were to observe the status quo from 1948 and certainly after 1967, when many other holy sites came under its purview, we could have understood the logic of not recognizing those other sacred sites. In order not to go into this, it is very complex to recognize a sacred site because so many times they belong to more than one religion, and it's better not to get into this. But because the State of Israel has repeatedly breached the status quo, and I've given you some examples, we believe that a non-formal recognition and a mess prevailing in those around those holy places, who is responsible, how are they to be protected, what is the accurate list of those sites, we believe that this reflects a dangerous comportment which also breaches international commitments that the State of Israel has undertaken ever since it was established. Thank you very much.
תודה.